or capture.
Yeah, gotta carry on tradition.
What happens in an underground organization when the first and second in command are either killed or captured?
Yeah, gotta carry on tradition. I'm here to carry on tradition. We gotta carry on tradition. Man, listen.
Okay.
We on mission trying to carry on tradition. I know the government listen, they fighting for extradition. They wishing my right to the First Amendment be rescinded. When I'm penning these lyrics, them brothers and sisters in tenements hear it, look in the mirror, they start feeling fearless, then follow me, marching down the block, Marcus Garvey appearing in the flesh. For the second time, it's red, black, and green on the crest, Black Star Line. We've been oppressed cause they've been obsessed, trying to suppress this intellect since Imhotep, the architect, stayed building. I'm on my Benjamin Banneker, Lewis, these Latimer, giving them like the reason they matter is they preferring the shadow while we shining immaculate green with envy cause they can't manufacture it. Got the African continent on my amulet feet, color with burnt brass like Jesus of Nazareth. Every revolution leading the catalyst from the passages of Spook who sat by the door, the protagonist, moving like I'm Sam Green Lee in green fatigues while these Uncle Tom Kermit sipping they green tea. In these mean streets, the beast just wanna feast. He just pulled up his seat, unfold his handkerchief. It's like dinner is served, Monsieur Bon Appetit. The judges, the police, the government on the sneak. The saga never ceased, the cycle on repeat. The enemy on the creep, the torch was passed to me. I'm trying to carry on tradition for my peoples to be free.
Trying to carry on tradition, cause it provides with the proper insight to God. I'm trying to carry on tradition, cause it provides with the proper insight to God. I'm trying to carry on tradition, cause it provides with the proper insight to God. I'm trying to carry on tradition.
Prepare your mind for expansion. Can you fathom me? Go from atoms to atom, design intelligent, all because of a pattern. It's intrinsic. They say the wisdom is infinite, and if the tip of a pen is dipped in oceans with reservoirs that are limitless, to write a manuscript, you still couldn't extinguish it. Feel the rhythm of the algorithmic. This binary mind is balancing the Tao in physics. If consciousness is existence, then postulates possibilities endless. Oscillating between them forces tremendous. We contemplating source beginnings, diagonally higher, alpha, omega. We looking for truth. Is it found in the Vedas? Siddharthical time are found in the shade of the Bodhi tree, or the potency in its poetry. It's summer on the level of what Odin speaks. Decipher runes and some Roman ruins. On second view, and omics statue nose is looking like it's Patrick Ewing. Tanakh chapters, Quran, Supras, Orbis, Buddhist sutras, in a cipher with shooters. My hand gestures look like Buddhist mudras. They try to knock the hustle, they can't knock the guru. They off that Hulu, doing dark side like Count Dooku. I'm making voodoo on the steps of Pyramid Khufu. Holla your hoodoo, keep on spitting out this black voodoo. Traditions we carry be ancient, a myriad of perspectives trying to explain what our places. A complicated arrangement of colored faces, different languages, animals, minerals, molecular matrix, heaven and hell reincarnation. It's all sides of the same conversation. The real question is it evolution or elevation? Is it really the fit who survive when the soul and mind is stuck in stagnation? It's high technology but impotent moral interpretations. We ignore suffering by changing the station or playing with applications on a smart mobile device. Thousands in your social network, but you can't socialize. The wolves in sheep clothing that come and move the wool from your eyes. And we reap what we sow. We got a spoonful of lies. Tradition says the ways in the heart is not in the sky. Tradition says the ways in the heart is not in the sky. Tradition says the ways in the heart is not in the sky. Tradition says the ways in the heart is not in the sky. Yeah, carry on tradition. We here to carry on tradition.
Cause it provides with the proper insight to God. I'm trying to carry on tradition, cause it provides with the proper insight to God. I'm trying to carry on tradition.
When man becomes possessor of the knowledge of himself, he becomes master of his environment, the captain of his own ship, the director of his own destiny, the accomplisher of his own ends.
Trying to carry on tradition.
Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. That's one that's gonna never get old. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. So let me get my man primed up here. Where we at? One day I'm gonna learn how to do this stuff. I'm supposed to go here to I'm not done, Tyson. Here we go. Let's see. More. Make co-host. All right, you should be on and popping, my brother. You straight?
Yeah. Alhamdulillah. I see it now. I see it now.
you
It's
know,
good. It's
you know
good.
when this when the little prompt comes up here where you know who you're gonna make co-host, it says make Tyson Amir co-host, right?
Mm-hmm.
What flashed in my mind right quick is that Mike Tyson Amir. Say yeah, he about to get into the ring right here.
Oh
So
yeah.
let me fall back as we say, and you do what you do. All right.
Alhamdulillah.
All right.
It's
Welcome everybody. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Assalamu wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It's appreciated being a part of this. I appreciate it a great deal. I thank the brothers and sisters who consistently come to the Zoom, brothers and sisters watching through Facebook or wherever else they might be experiencing this. It's great. I really enjoyed the process. I remember when Imam Fahim, he was like, Tyson, I need you to ride with me on this. I was like, okay, let me know what we're gonna do. We're gonna do it. So I really look forward to this every Saturday, getting an opportunity to be in community with you all, because I learned so much from you all. And inshallah, especially those of us, we get a chance to interact at, Masjid Wadathadeen. Let me know when there's stuff that you see, especially the history that we're talking about right now, because I just have a few more parts in this book. We're talking about the history of the Nation of Islam. We're going to have a section on Malcolm. And then from there, we're going to be going into the Black Panther Party, because that tradition from Marcus Garvey and the UNIA to the impact on the Nation of Islam, and then the growth and spread of the Nation of Islam, and the continuation of that into the community that we are a part of and that we have benefited greatly from. And there's still brothers and sisters who have reestablished themselves on the old foundations, or the majority of the older foundations of the Nation of Islam. So that is still alive and well. But those movements influencing young brothers and sisters throughout this country, especially here in the Bay Area, in West Oakland, and the formation of the Black Panther Party. So we're going to spend some time talking about that real soon. And then we finish it out with another international representation of this tradition of righteous rebellion, resistance, the power of our people coming together. And that's with Amilcar Cabral, so Guinea-Bissau, West Africa, and kicking out the Portuguese who started this whole thing back in 1440. So we got a little bit left. But I love it. I enjoy it. If there's stuff that you see and you're like, Tyson, think about this, or you said this, but really because of our experience, we saw this, we were there, you should say it this way. Let me know, please. I'm always a student. I want to learn. And because I have an opportunity to present this information to our young people, especially to our community, I want to make sure I'm giving them the right information. And I think part of why I'm saying that is because last Sunday, I was at Marcus Books. I was participating in a panel discussion with this younger brother, 31, 32, he just published a new book. It's called Being Black in America Schools. Matter of fact, I got it right here. Let me show you. Oh, hold up. I got the little thing on my camera right now. So this is the book. It's called Being Black in America School. So this is his name, Brian Rashad Fuller. So this book, he talks about his experience from like preschool to college and then beyond to career, and how his entire school career is just filled with all the stuff that we know was going on in schools to Black students. And it's a really good read. So he was there because, you know, he was promoting his new book. And then Blanche, you know, the sister whose family owns Marcus Books, she wanted to invite a few other folks who work in education. So she invited me. She invited Baba Jahi, who's the head of Ile Omade. She invited another younger brother by the name of Kamar Ogwing, who works for Berkeley Unified School District. And then she invited Brother Tony Green, who teaches at Bishop O'Dowd. And so we're in there and we're talking, and it was a great discussion and interaction. So then after, I speak with Brother Tony Green a little bit more, and he wants to invite me to do some stuff at Bishop O'Dowd. And he was telling me about the AP African American history course that he's teaching there. And he said, our core text is the autobiography of Malcolm X. I'm like, oh, that's great. That's great. And then he tells me that they use another book. They're using the Manning Marable book on Malcolm X, which is called A Life of Reinvention. And I remember when that book came out, I remember hearing from a lot of Black scholars that they were angry, infuriated with that text. And so I never even touched it. I never picked it up. I was like on boycott mode. I'm like, if this is what I'm hearing from our scholars and our elders about this book, then I ain't gonna spend no money on that. And when he said they're using that book, I said, okay, let me check it out because I want to see what they're saying. And I'm probably in chapter 5 or chapter 6 right now. I'm listening to it as an audio book. And as an audio book, you can adjust the speed that you listen to it. Like, I'm so tired of this book. I got it on almost 2 times the regular speed so I can just get through it quick. And there are so many things that are being said in this book that are so offensive and disrespectful of our tradition. And so I know this is a long preface, but I'll get into what we're going to talk about soon. But that's also part of the reason why I'm saying I know the responsibility, or at least I have an understanding of the responsibility and the honor of being in community and having the opportunity to impart information to the community. I want to make sure that what I'm doing, to the best of our knowledge, is accurate or as close to being accurate as possible. So that's why I'm saying, when we interact, you see me, let me know. Let me know, especially when I'm talking about our history. I wasn't there. I wasn't there in the 60s. I wasn't there in the 70s. I definitely was there in the early 80s, but not like that. I was, just coming into this world. So y'all know it because you saw it. So feel free, please pull me up. Keep pouring into me and being an example for me, because it's important to me, and then it's going to have an impact. Because I don't want to be in a position like this book, this Manning Marable book, where it's just falsehoods that are being told about our history. I'll give you one example, and this is something that just happened recently in my listen to it. He was talking about how the Nation of Islam as a Muslim community was, like, in the 50s and the 60s, becoming connected more to the larger global Muslim community. And the opinion of Manning Marable was that because of that, it was going to be moving more to a traditional or orthodox understanding of Islam, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But then he makes this statement. He makes a statement about, in 1975, when the Honorable Elijah Muhammad passes away, and Imam Warathdin Muhammad takes over, he describes this as, he says, and then when the rebellious Wallace Muhammad takes over leadership, he completely rejects the old foundations of the Nation of Islam and moves it in a different direction. The fact that this dude had the gall to refer to Imam Warathdin Muhammad as rebellious was so offensive. And there's a whole bunch of other things that he did in this text like that. So there's some people who are reading that and they don't know this history. They don't know the nuances of it. And that can be how this history and these particular people in that important historical moment is framed in their heads, especially young people who are reading this in a class or something like that. And as I'm saying, for me, it's a fight. I'm fighting every time I'm looking at this book or I'm listening to this book, because there are so many opportunities that the author is taking. And then we don't even know if it was really Manning Marable, because it came out after he passed away. So it could have been other folks who went back into this book and did those things. But still, it's in this text, and this text is associated with this man who was respected as a great scholar. So that's what I'm saying. I don't want us to be in that position. I don't want to be in that position. So please let me know anytime you feel I need a different perspective on something. Okay, cool. Here we go. And I'll just go a few minutes on this. So this is what we talked about a little bit last week because of where we are. We're now moving into the tradition of the Nation of Islam. And I was pointing out some stuff about this picture because, I was using AI tools. And I know Imam Fahim was speaking a little bit about AI yesterday in the khutbah. I wasn't able to be at the masjid. I was at schools, but I caught it on Facebook. And in the AI generation, for me, I thought it was just really beautiful how when I was working on this image, I have, I think, a really good representation of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And then immediately off to, if you're looking at it, like his left shoulder, there's another face that's there prominently. And for me, that looks like a young Imam Warithuddin Muhammad. I just think that's a beautiful thing. I didn't intentionally do that, but that's what the AI gave me. And I love that. And so when I saw that, I said, yes, that's the one. That's the image that I want to open this up with, because that demonstrates the tradition and it counters what's in that Manning Marable book. He wasn't rebellious. And as Imam Fahim was telling us as we were in the earlier sessions of Rise, Imam Warithuddin was prepared to take the nation to that next step. So instead of it being rebellious, that's him fulfilling the mission. You know what I'm saying? He was fulfilling the purpose. He was taking the tradition to the next place that it needed to be. Because the first phase of the nation, we're cleaning you up. We're doing the wudu. And then when you're purified and you're cleaned up, you now move through that door into the next phase. But this man who doesn't have any understanding of the history, the culture, the nuances, the reality of what was happening there, his biased, ignorant, limited perspective was he was being rebellious. Instead of what he was doing, which was fulfilling the tradition. And then missing where we are rebellious. We're rebellious because we reject what is happening here in the United States. We reject what's happening under the umbrella of white supremacy culture and domination and all that. We rightfully reject that. And we're rebellious in those instances. But when it comes to understanding our tradition, our roles, being on our position, we fulfill that to the highest level. So yeah, that's just something that's been in my mind for these past couple of days. And many of you are my elders, and many of you, I'm talking about your story because you lived it. So I'm not being arrogant in assuming I know your experience better than you do. So please pull my coattail. Let me know. Tyson, is this way. Is this, is that. I'm here. I'm listening. All right. So then for today, this is another important part of what I put into this section for Carry On Tradition. So this is a section entitled The Tradition of the Nation of Islam. So it's intentionally titled that. And then I put this section here, which are these 2 pages about Malcolm within that section, because Malcolm is a byproduct of the UNIA, Universal Negro Improvement Association, so Garvey's organization, because his mother and father were prominent members of the UNIA. His father was most likely killed because he was a UNIA leader. And his mother was being blackballed in society after her husband was killed because she was also a prominent leader and fixture in the Black community. So these are the early lessons that are put in the little home. So Malcolm's older siblings, Malcolm's younger siblings, they remember what they were being taught by their family and what was being demonstrated in their family by their parents. So he's definitely a byproduct of a radical, righteous Black tradition before there was anything, or before we had an understanding of the Nation of Islam. That was there in his foundation, and not just his foundation, the foundation of his siblings. But as Malcolm's father's taken away from him, as his mother is eventually put into a mental institution. So Malcolm is around 13, 14 when both of his parents are out of his life. He's in the system. Bounces around from a couple of different homes, and then he ends up in like not like a halfway house, but he gets put into a home, or a larger home with young people. And he's there and he's just experiencing the brutality of what the United States, or the wilderness of North America, has for Black people, especially Black children. And then he doesn't have the shelter or the protection of his parents anymore to help keep that off of him. He got to fend for himself. And he's separated from his siblings. They communicate as much as they could and see each other as much as they can, but he's out there dealing with this on his own. And then he gets out of that, stays with his sister in Boston for a while, but those years of not having mother, father strong in his life takes a toll on him, and then just trying to survive. So he gets caught up hustling and all that. And we know he gets sent to prison. And like many brothers and sisters in our community before us, presently, in the future, we end up thrown into these jails and these prisons because they're an extension of this history of forced enslavement in our country. And who are the people who are principally most affected by forced enslavement? Black folks. And so the same is true when we see in jails and prisons, because the United States has just found another way to profit off of their exploitation and oppression of our community again. And they're continuing to do that. And now is one of those things that we said earlier, throughout the entire history of the colony that now calls itself the United States of America, slavery has never been illegal because they have always profited off of that. And who have been the people that they've profited off of the most? Us. So they ain't gonna stop until we make them stop. That's just the reality of that situation. They're not gonna stop until we make them stop. So Malcolm is in prison, and his family never forgets him. And as his family moves into the nation, his older brother, and then one of his younger brothers, and then his sister. So he had 3 siblings that had joined the nation while he was in prison. And they're like, this is like what our parents were doing. They recognize it right away. They saw how the way that the nation was constructed in the late 40s, early 50s was very similar to what they were experiencing as children with their parents being in the UNIA. We bring Black people together. We're proud of who we are. We have a vision for ourselves as a Black community. And then, of course, the nation had more of a overt spiritual philosophy to it that the UNIA didn't necessarily have, but they saw that, and they knew that because this was similar to what their parents were doing, it was going to be something that would reach Malcolm. Even though Malcolm had lost himself in the streets and hustling for years, they knew it. And then they developed a strategy in order to bring that information to Malcolm. Malcolm's older brother first sends a letter to him telling him about they joined this new organization, this and that. And they knew that that would get his attention, but it's not going to be the thing that's really going to get him to move. Then the next person up was going to be his younger brother who knew how to speak to Malcolm using the language of the street. Dropped some stuff, gave him some updates on the family, and then was like, we know a way to get you out of prison. If like you're willing to open up your mind or free your mind type thing. So he says it in like a cryptic way. And they knew that by bringing it to Malcolm in that way, he's going to be in there thinking like, what's this? What's he got? What type of scheme he got? What's he thinking of that's going to allow me to get out of prison? Then they start introducing him into the knowledge of the Nation of Islam. And Malcolm begins to soak it up, and he instantly sees the connection between what the nation stands on principally and what they were raised on as children in the UNIA. Like, if that's not carry on tradition, I don't know what is. You know what I'm saying? You had his parents, and even though his parents were taken out of his life, they tried to build a foundation for their kids. And then when their kids found something that was connected to the same basic principles of what they were introduced to as children, they instantly saw it. And not only that, they gravitated to it and they embraced it with all of their might. And because of that, this was something that was able to pull this young brother out of the depths of prison because of what his parents did, how they demonstrated the tradition, how they passed it on. And it was embedded so deep in them that it was when the call was made out to Malcolm, when he's sitting in a prison in this country, he heard it, he recognized it, and he reoriented himself and brought himself back to who he was meant to be. And then begins to excel in all these incredible ways that we know from the history of Malcolm. But that's the power of our tradition. And that goes to what I was able to see a little bit in the khutbah from yesterday, because Imam Fahim was talking about AI, and he was mentioning like Chat GPT and a few things like that. And he was talking about how Chat GPT, if you search some stuff about Islam and Quran in there, like it'll lie to your face because it's not giving you the information correctly. Like we can't have more faith in these systems and these institutions that are outside of ourselves, especially if we don't know who we are as Muslims, as Black people, as like this history of righteous rebellion, this tradition of righteous rebellion. We got to know who we are, because if we do, if our connection to our source, our creator, is strong, the knowledge and the wisdom that's embedded in our religious tradition, that's going to support us with anything that we deal with. If we know ourselves in terms of the people that we come from, it doesn't matter what newfangled technological instrument or innovation that they create. We know who we are. And they can plan, we plan, Allah's the best of planners. If we're connected to that source properly, we do what we're asked to do, and inshallah, we will be successful. And so, even though this country tried everything, take his father away, take his mother away, put him in the belly of the beast, literally in a dungeon, in a prison, because the tradition was implanted, it was passed on. When the call was made, he was able to hear it. And even though all that planning was done to try to separate and destroy that family, they knew who they were. And when he was able to recognize, oh, this is not who I am, this is who I am, he was able to walk up out of that and become who we knew this brother was going to be able to become. So in this image right here, this is me trying to depict a young Malcolm. And so this is a young Malcolm in the nation, because when he stepped out of that prison, he stepped into a loving, strong, beautiful, and not perfect, because no community is perfect. The prophetic community, the Sahaba, they're not perfect. So we don't romanticize it, but it was a loving, beautiful, strong, united Black community. That's what he was able to step into. And with that, even though he didn't have a quote unquote formal education that was high school, college, and university, his brilliance shined, his leadership abilities shined, his organization abilities shined, and his example inspired so many other brothers and sisters. Nation was already there and was inspiring brothers and sisters, but his particular display of the knowledge and the understanding and the practice of this tradition inspired so many other people to want to participate in the Nation of Islam, to pay attention to it, come through, and then, of course, to join. So you see temples popping up, and there's brothers over here. He's in Boston. He's in Philadelphia. Eventually, he's in Harlem. They have him going around the country to other places to help with recruitment drives, because people are responding to the way that this man speaks, the way that he moves, and it's supported by this culture that's already been established within the Nation of Islam. So there's no way, if we're talking about Malcolm authentically, at least this is my opinion, there's no way for us to really do honor and justice to him without situating him in the nation and how the nation helped edify him more based on what his parents already gave him. And then, of course, he steps outside of the nation. And that's an important part of the story too, which we talk about. But we don't get the Malcolm that we know without those years in the nation. And him being called to those years in the nation by what his parents gave him, by being involved in the UNIA and Garvey's movement. So it's an important part. It can't just be skipped over. And some folks now like to do that. They want to, appropriate Malcolm's tradition, and they want to discount the years that he was in the Nation of Islam and how that helped him grow and become who he became. Now you got to tell the whole story. And yeah, he ended up leaving the nation. We tell that story too. But what the nation did for Malcolm, it was able to do for so many other brothers and sisters. So we got to tell the truth. So that's why in this part, there's this depiction of young Malcolm in the nation. And then we talk more about that experience, how he became part of the nation. And then we do different than what is in Spike Lee's film, because in Spike Lee's film, there's no mention of his family whatsoever. And the role that they played in helping him learn about the nation and then staying in the nation, that he doesn't do that. He creates some fictional character. There's a brother who was really in his life named Bimby, and then they create this other fictional character that really introduces him, Brother Baines. That's the name of the character from the Spike Lee movie. So he creates this character named Brother Baines, who begins introducing him to the Nation of Islam. That wasn't Brother Baines, that was his family. So we tell that story correctly here. And then we get to, in this part, when he leaves the nation. And then we talk about that piece in this part, the legacy of Malcolm X. Because after he leaves the nation, there are a number of things that Malcolm does, operating on his own, using his intellect, using his analysis, his strategizing, his organization ability, connecting with groups all throughout the United States, connecting with groups internationally, and really putting at the forefront of his mission the spiritual reality for Black folks and the freedom and the liberation of Black folks, and dealing with the political, institutional, and systemic systems of oppression that are affecting us globally. And that transformation, or that evolutionary step, is important in Malcolm's life. And I think another piece that's really important, like I'm 44, so I'm older than Malcolm when Malcolm was assassinated. Malcolm didn't even make it to his 40th year. He was young. And so I'll make this last point as I wrap up, going back to the book, the Manning Marable book. He calls it a life of a reinvention. Like, he has this opinion of Malcolm that Malcolm reinvented himself multiple times to fit whatever new setting that he was in. Malcolm was evolving. He was learning. He was growing. Malcolm lost his father. He eventually lost his mother. He was thrown into this super hyper racist society that attacked him and his family from all sides, and that his matriarch and patriarch were gone. He was then thrown into prison. He was still learning who he was and moving into, his adulthood and his manhood. He was still maturing. That's not reinvention, that's growth. When you talk about it as reinvention in the way that this author says, you can say reinvention. Reinvention can be a positive thing. But you can also say reinvention and it can be, like, you don't know who you are, so you're playing a role. Like we talk about the imposter syndrome. Reinvention can be that as well. And that's how this book is framing Malcolm and Malcolm's growth. And that's incorrect. He was growing. He was learning. And when he learned something and he knew, this is what I'm supposed to be doing, he would make that change. He would shift, which is a sound Islamic principle, which is a sound principle within our community as well. And it's an important part of this tradition, because when we try one way to do something, if that doesn't work, we got to be able to learn from that. That doesn't mean that we're reinventing ourselves. We learn from it. And we want to pass on that knowledge to the next generation, so then they can apply that knowledge and that understanding and that awareness in the crises that they might face in their generation. That's tradition. But that book doesn't understand tradition, doesn't understand it's a learning process. There's maturity that comes through that learning process. There's trial and error and growth that comes through that learning process. Because we know who we are. We're not trying to make ourselves up to fit these other people around us. That's not what we do. And the nation is a great example of that. We know who we are. That's why we do what we do. Malcolm was a great personal example of that. And next time, we'll talk a little bit more about Malcolm after the nation, and then begin setting up how Malcolm's example directly contributed to the birth of the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense on October 15, 1966. How do we know that? Because Huey said it. Huey talked about how he saw Malcolm in 1963 at McClymonds High School in West Oakland. Huey talked about how he read so much of Malcolm's work and how he was just thoroughly impressed by the example of Malcolm. And when Malcolm was killed and became an ancestor for us, Huey believed that somebody needed to carry on the political legacy of Malcolm. October 15, 1966, Black Panther Party was formed. So there's one thing for me to say, it's another thing for me to prove it, and we'll be able to see that next week. But this is what I wanted to share this morning, so I'm gonna fall back.
Takbir. Alhamdulillah. I know I can't hear you, but I know you said it, you know. That's beautiful. It's wonderful, wonderful. That's a great blessing. This is a treasure that we have. Let me keep on trying to get this other thing right. We're gonna do what we can while we can with what we have to do. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. So carry on tradition. You know, I do a broadcast with my daughter Haja Kamila Mahasin Shuaibe on Mondays, and she precedes me. Yeah, you are going to put your clap in the chat for Tyson, because it's very, very rich. There's no overestimating how valuable what he has preserved and shares with us. But when after Haja, when she does hers, she precedes me on Mondays with that, and I could just talk about just what she talked about, and I'm saying it's not a boast. It's just the idea that it just sends you in a direction, and there's so much to know. There's just so much to know, and so therefore, I will mention just one thing. There's a book, Malcolm Gladwell, and I think it's David and Goliath, one of those. And I save notes and commentary when I find reinforcing anecdotes, examples of it. I save these under what is called desirable difficulties. Desirable difficulties. God tells us in the Quran, "Inna ma'al usri yusr," barely with difficulty comes relief. And in Malcolm Gladwell's book, he talks about, you know, the difference between geniuses and prodigies. And one of the things that prodigies, when we say prodigies, now we're talking about people who are at the level of savant on whatever it might be. It could be just so many fields. One of the things that are held in common, you talk about prime ministers, you talk about athletes, you talk about artists, you talk about, you know, political leaders, etc. Their history, most of them lose parents very early. They lose their parents especially the father. Sometimes they lose both, but it's under those circumstances, which is a general hallmark. It doesn't mean, obviously, that everyone who loses their parents early becomes a prodigy or something like that. But the greatest ones among us, in general, he's saying as a rule, as a principle from that research, comes from people who have come through the hardest of emotional, psychological, traumatic circumstances. Of course, yes, many There are many that don't survive or don't contribute to society, or their story, quote unquote, doesn't end in a heroic manner, as is the case with, say, Malcolm, but it's a part of it. So I'm saying you're seeing that in his history. He just becomes an example. And this is also to say that it is the sunnah of Allah. It is the sunnah of Allah that this is the way that Allah does, right? We're going to move on, but let's say this also. Al-Hajj Malik al-Shabazz, assassinated at 39. Martin Luther King Jr., also assassinated, 39. Didn't quite get to 40. Didn't quite get to 40. And there's an arc. The way that Martin Luther King Jr. was moving, in the way his trajectory, his, let's just call it character arc, if we were talking about it as a movie, he was moving from where he was over towards the quote unquote, the more Malcolm side of it. You get the analogy. And then also Malcolm was moving also toward the Martin Luther King aspect of it. When I say metaphorically, philosophically, let's just do it like that. There's an arc that each one was coming up, but at 39, each one assassinated. Why? Because they both represented the same objective, which was not desired, to put it lightly, by the powers that be. So the consequence was the same for them, only because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allowed it. Nothing lives or dies except by the will of Allah. And Allah says in the Quran, he talks about, and he's going to take martyr witnesses to truth. That is, there are people who are going to die unjustly in their battle for the truth. And Allah is going to allow, and Allah has allowed them to be killed or crucified. And we're not going to get into the whole Quranic dialogue in that sense. But there is an analogy, a sign that Allah has given us in the life. If you speak especially from the quote unquote biblical perspective, which has its value in Quran, but you have to learn how to read it out. And our help comes from the Imam in terms of that. But you can see how these martyrs, they accepted, quote unquote, the cross that they had to bear. They resigned themselves to, I know I'm going to die in the effort to try to do what I'm doing, but you know what? I'm ready to die for this thing. This is what I'm ready to die for. So you have that. And here's a little nugget. Malcolm. So we want to see, be very clear. Allah was never absent at any time or place. Malcolm, when he changed his name was Al-Malik al-Shabazz, right? Al-Hajj al-Malik al-Shabazz. Al-Hajj, of course, is a title. Was Malik, his king. And what about on the other side of that arc? Martin Luther King. And if you don't, so you got one king and another king. And if you don't get it from there, how about the very fact that MLK are the initials for Martin Luther King, and MLK are the consonants for Malik, which is Al-Hajj Malik al-Shabazz. That's Allah talking to us, just saying, I got this. I got this. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. And that happenstance picture, wonderful photo, that happenstance picture of Malcolm and Martin. I think it was just an encounter where they ran into each other in the airport or something like that, and caught that picture. And Tyson, I know you got that picture in your folio, man. Uh, pull it up and you can
You
we
want me to
can
get it? All right.
yeah, get it, man, get it, and then you can display it before I take off. And listen, y'all, we always every time we come on, we just gonna do as much as we can do with the time that we have. I'm gonna be checking out at the normal, quote unquote 10 o'clock time. Fine, whatever we get to cover between that time. But you need to see this picture. It's like one picture is worth 10,000 words, right? Tyson, let me know when you have it.
I
Um,
got it. I'm getting ready to share screen.
let's go.
All right, hold on. Let me get that there.
Do I need to? Am I sharing now? No.
Nah, I got it. I got it. Here we go. All
Yeah,
right, y'all can see it.
yeah. That's it. Blow it up a little bit. Put it on. Can you pop it in the like a full screen kind of mode?
Yeah, let me do that.
Yeah. Do these look like men who are mad at each other? Do they look like, oh man, this nigga, man, what he got? I said, no, no. These men knew that they were battling for the same thing. And this is Allah bringing this moment together. I know, alhamdulillah, it's been my life's experiences, especially in al-Islam, but it also could touches back to the history. Allah brings certain people in to their mutual lives because, like, look, I got somebody I want you to meet, period. So it's like, here. So God puts them into a situation where they are connected and connected by the grace of Allah. Alhamdulillah. Thanks, Tyson. Yeah, that everybody, just remember that because it is the same tradition and everything that Tyson has given us, this morning and before, it's just absolutely true. You truly do see Allah's hand in the whole thing. It's like God is doing this, and so we just play our part, which is what I'm going to do right now. Let's see. I thought I was recording. Now I am. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Let's go. So today we're going to take another step. Inshallah, with Allah's help and grace, inshallah, it is our desire to wrap the issue of Bilalian as the master narrative. I want to wrap that up today. And in actuality, to the extent that we are successful, there's so much more to everything. To the extent that we're able to do that, actually, that's going to closing out with the Bilalian as master narrative. Inshallah, if and when we're able to finish that, we can start going to, because there's a level of what we're talking about that is truly, truly transcendent. And because what was all the fixing of the past? What was it all for? Okay, we got that fixed. We got the right name, we got the right label, we got the right identity. But okay, now what? Right? The Renaissance. I have to hold myself back. Let me give you a preview. No, let's just finish this.
What happened?
So we spoke. So we're talking about Bilal as master narrator. Just have that as the cornerstone in your consciousness right now. It's like, okay, what is he trying to say? What point is he trying to make? The point he's trying to make is that Bilal is a container. Do you know that words, doesn't matter, whatever, words are containers for meaning? That's what words are. Whenever you see a word, that word is holding something abstract called meaning. Look at any one of these words on this page. Need is a word, N-E-E-D. It's a word. Okay, so what? Well, those four letters are signals to a certain kind of meaning. I'm not going to go into it. When you go into dictionaries, that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to get the meaning of a word, or you're trying to identify what is this word carrying? What is the abstract that this word carries? And you do the same for African, you do the same for American, you do the same for social, you do the same for myth. All of those are, just take it concretely, they are words. They're words. But these are words that are not empty, they contain abstracts called meaning, right? And so in terms of that, so the idea is to get to the point where we can comprehend and embrace that Bilal is a word. Bilal is a word, as with all other quote unquote words. It's a word. The question is, and the point is, that it is a word carrying what meaning? All right. And that meaning, does that meaning successfully and appropriately identify a substance, meaning abstract content, that rightly applies to this people as to who they are and who they hope to be? Who they are and who they hope to be. All right, like many of us, we chose our names in distinction from the names that we were born with. We chose our names. And those names, the names that we chose, they are both labels and they are aspirations. They label, they identify qualities and attributes that we possess, and they also hold the aspirations that we have in connection with those identified qualities that are labeled by that name. Meaning, Fahim is my name, right? Fahim means one who understands. So that's quote unquote, I qualify in my present existence to warrant or justify that name, Fahim. But then it represents an aspiration that I'm always trying to understand. All right. And I'm seeking to understand more than I understand now. Right. So our names are their labels and their destinations. Their labels and their destinations. And that's for all names, all labels, right? Even when we use the terminology labels, right? You put a label on something, the expectation is that the label and the content matches. The label and the content matches. So a label is something to be put on a content so that when you see the label, you know what's in it. Okay, so the same, such as it is with names and labels and identity of a people. And we're talking about Bilal and Bilalian. So then we have to talk about label and content. And we have to talk about the label as also, as with all words, containers of abstract meaning. Okay, so the goal is to understand Bilal as a master narrative, because that, when you talk about names for people, then the name for a people is carrying that, should carry that people's master narratives. The name, master narrative, the name for a people should be the label to identify that people's master narrative. If the label doesn't do that, then you have the wrong label on the quote unquote the people, because it is not rightly identifying their master narrative. Your name is supposed to do that for you. Your name is supposed to provide a master narrative. It's supposed to represent your master narrative. And you always have that to register back to. I'm saying a lot of that's on many of these plates right now, but you have that constantly to refer back to consciously and unconsciously, so that it provides a quote unquote moral, spiritual compass for you as to what should I be doing now, which direction should I be traveling in, is it lined up with my master narrative or is it against my master narrative? Am I being something other than myself, in the old language of the Nation of Islam? So let's go on. So these are things that, I don't know, many episodes ago we started talking about this with the Imam, but I need to bring it back now because we're at that point where we can see it solidly connected to a choice or a resolution that we've made about this question. So the Imam talked about the need for an African-American social myth. And you remember that Farad gave us a myth, and we pointed out very clearly that it was a noble lie, but that the very fact that it's a noble lie is nothing new. Having noble lies is in the history of civilization. That's what happens. But I'm not going to go back over that. So following the Imam's comment, or reiterating the Imam's comment, he says, hey, how did other people do it? The Arab has an idea, whether it is a myth or a fact. The Arab has an idea of his Arab origin. He has an idea of his ethnic spirit, the will that has kept them as a people, the common nature and the common sense and the common aspirations that make them a people, that has made for their spirit, that has survived and lasted. They have an idea, whether it is myth or fact, and is the combination of both myth and fact. So it is for the European. So we could take just this statement here and just go into the the bits and pieces of it, as we did with the issue of ideology, ethnic personality, and human personality, and we're going to touch on that again. But the idea is that the Imam gives so much answers in 3 or 4, 5 sentences. So, but then when you parse out, unpack, it's clear when he says it in a manner of speaking. But the depth of it and the expertise in it and the wisdom in it and the science in it, it takes the slowing down and doing, literally, even from an English perspective, a grammatical analysis of what he said. Of course, we're not going to do that now, but he just said a lot. The point is that every people has this. Every people. Why are the Chinese so comfortable in their Chineseness, and the Japanese so comfortable in their Japaneseness, and every other ethnic group that has a stable human identity, they have a master narrative that underlies their sense of comfort, that underlies their sense of stability, that underlies what's called the diachronic continuity. They are connected over time to a past, whether that past goes all the way back to a myth or to a fact. Somebody has constructed a master narrative out of that history and has communicated it to the people that are identified with that history and say, this is who you are. And they say, okay, that's who we are. Boom. One generation learns it consciously, but then the generation that comes after that, they absorb it through socialization, enculturation, unconsciously, osmosis, hypnagogic states from 0 to 6, blah, 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 blah. That's what happens with everybody. But what about the people who have suffered diachronic discontinuity, who've been cut off? Well, there's a way and there's a place and there's a circumstance where they need to start all over. So much to be said. Let's go. So continuing in the same idea, the Imam says, the white man has a myth and a fact that he can relate to, that he can recall, that gave his people a long time ago a sense of identity. In the myth about the European people, the Roman people, which the other Europeans identify with, in the myth about the Roman people, there's a story of 2 brothers who found themselves without parents, orphans, but with no parents. Worse than that, they didn't even have human beings to take care of them. The myth says that a wolf nursed them. They suckled off of a she-wolf, and it made possible their survival. They grew up under the training of a wolf. When they got when they got to be big boys, they decided that they would become conquerors. One was too weak to jump over the wall to get into the city, so his brother condemned him and abandoned him. His brother jumped over the wall to get into the city. His brother jumped over the wall, went into the city, and became the father of the Roman people. His name in the myth is Romulus. That is an idea. It is only a myth, but it is an idea. So again, that's the master narrative for European people, right? And so therefore, that's what they consciously and unconsciously go back to as a motivation, as a recalibration of, okay, who we are, we got to be who we are. Our history gave us this. Okay, now we're kind of off track, so we need to recalibrate who we are, where we are. Okay, let's go back to the master narrative. Let's tie back into that. Let's become great again. Moving right along. So here's a very, very critical thing to understand. Even the term Caucasian is an adopted term that is not grounded in science, but it's the word, oh, he's Caucasian. Where'd you get that? Let's see, where'd you get that? The world. The term Caucasian was popularized by the Greek scientist Johann Friedrich Blumenbach in the 18th century. Blumenbach was a pioneer in early racial classification, and his system categorized humans into 5 races based on physical characteristics. He chose the term Caucasian after examining a skull from the Caucasus region. I remember the mother of God in the Nation of Islam and the Yaqub's myth story. She was Babaji from the Caucasus Mountains, okay? Any case, so the skull that this individual found and was examining, the skull came from the Caucasus region, which is modern day Georgia. That's Georgia, Russia, not Atlanta, Georgia. Georgia, Russia, the Georgians, okay? Okay, which he considered to be the most beautiful and representative of what he saw as the ideal human form. That is, he had these skulls. He looked at the skull, you know, that crazy science that they had in the late 19th and early 20th century, phrenology, right? That Django piece with, DiCaprio in that, the whole skull thing. Well, this guy, 18th century, that means the 1700s, he was looking at skulls, and the skull that appeared to him to be the most beautiful had nothing to do with the name or anything like that. It's just, this is the more perfect out of all of these skulls. This is the more perfect. Where did it come from? It came from the Caucasus Mountains. Okay, so we will be Caucasians. Okay, so Blumenbach's, his choice of the name had little to do with actual ethnicity or the people native to the Caucasus region. It was an aesthetic choice. This head, smoother, more symmetrical, more round, if you will. In my perception, this is the best one, so we are the best, so we are going to name ourselves after this beautiful skull, right? So it was based on aesthetic judgment, which was unscientific and highly subjective. Over time, Caucasian became a broad term used to refer to people of European, North African, and some Asian descent, even